The sun had begun its slow descent over the horizon, turning the wheat fields into rivers of gold, the same fields where years ago 2 barefoot children had raced one another, laughing until their lungs burned, collapsing in the tall grass to dream of futures they could not yet understand. Now the man who had once been that boy rode slowly into the fields again, his hat pulled low to shade his eyes, his boots dusty from the trail, the weight of years and choices pressing on his shoulders. He was a cowboy hardened by storms, by loss, by the endless road. But as his horse carried him across the familiar ground, his heart beat with the memory of a girl who had once kept pace with him under this same fading sky. He reined in and saw her standing there among the tall stalks, her dress swaying with the breeze, her hair pinned up neatly as though she had expected him, though neither of them had spoken in years. For a moment silence stretched between them, filled only with the whisper of wheat and the ache of all the time they had lost. When he finally dismounted, his boots sank into the soil they had once claimed as theirs, and his voice, cracked from dust and longing, broke the quiet. He told her he had come back not for the land, not for the town that had judged him, not for the family who had turned away, but for her, the girl who had once outrun the whole world at his side. He reminded her of the days when they had carved their names in the bark of the old oak by the river, swearing they would never let go of one another, swearing they would run free. She listened, torn between the life she had built and the yearning she had buried. And in her eyes he saw the battle she fought, the duty to stay and the desire to go. He stepped closer, the evening light painting the scar on his cheek, the symbol of all the fights he had endured, and he whispered the words that carried the weight of years. "Run away with me again." The field seemed to hold its breath, and she felt her heart pull her backward in time, to the child she had once been, to the boy who had held her hand and dared her to chase dreams bigger than the fences around their lives. She wanted to tell him she couldn't, that too much had changed. But as the wind swept around them, carrying the scent of wheat and dust, she realized the fire he carried had never left her either. In his eyes she saw freedom, risk, love, and the promise of everything unknown. For a heartbeat she was no longer the woman bound by expectations, but the girl who had once laughed until tears ran down her cheeks as she raced through these very fields. She asked him what would happen if they left. What if the world was crueler than their dreams? What if they ended up with nothing but each other? He smiled in that quiet, steady way of his, the way that had once made her believe they could tame even the wildest storm, and he told her that nothing else mattered, that having each other was enough, that the world could strip them of land, money, and name, but it could never strip them of the love that had always been theirs. She looked down at the earth beneath her feet, then back at the man who had once been her everything, and she felt the dam inside her breaking. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, as though afraid that touching him would make the dream vanish. But when his calloused hand closed around hers, it was solid, real, undeniable. The field that had once held their laughter now bore witness to their choice. The horse stamped impatiently, ready to ride, and the horizon burned with the colors of fire and hope. She let out a shaky breath and finally nodded, her voice barely louder than a whisper, but strong enough to seal their fate. "Let's run." Together they walked toward the horse, side by side as they once had been, older now, wearier, but bound by a promise that time had not killed. As he lifted her into the saddle, he looked back at the fields, at the ghosts of the children they had been, and he felt peace knowing he had come full circle, that he had not returned in vain. They rode off into the fading light, laughter breaking loose once more, carried by the wind, a sound too wild to be forgotten. And as the dust rose behind them, the story of 2 children grown into lovers yet again became the story of hope, of courage, and of love that refused to die. Dear listener, if this tale stirred your heart and carried you into the fields with them, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more stories of courage, love, and destiny are waiting for you, and you don't want to miss a single one. The night swallowed them whole as they rode away from the fields, the stars spilling like diamonds across the endless sky, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders, replaced by the thrill of freedom and the fear of the unknown. He held the reins steady, his hand occasionally brushing against hers, grounding her in the reality that this was no dream. They had truly left everything behind. The wind tugged at her hair, The steady beat of the horse's hooves drummed like a heartbeat against the earth, and with each mile she felt the distance from her old life widen. They stopped at a creek to rest, the water glinting silver in the moonlight, and he knelt beside her, speaking in that low, certain voice that always steadied her doubts. He told her he had wandered through towns and deserts, through lonely nights and broken promises, but every road had led him back to her, and he swore he would spend the rest of his life proving that leaving with him had been worth it. She watched the flames of their small fire flicker in his eyes, saw the man he had become scarred but unbroken, and realized that love was not about safety, it was about courage.